G'day guys and welcome to It's Only Money, where we answer your questions about money. My name's Ash, I'm a certified financial planner, and today we are talking about self-managed super funds, so hang around and find out whether or not you should or shouldn't have one. Thanks for tuning in. Today's question, we've been asked, what is a self-managed super fund and should I have one? And in fact, we've had a few inquiries on those in the last couple of months, sort of more than usual. So I thought it was a good idea to answer that question. What's involved in a self-managed fund? Why would you have one? And why wouldn't you have one? So let's do that. So self-managed super funds are gaining in popularity. In years gone by, they were too expensive for most people to have, and there wasn't a really good reason to have one. So with advances in fintech and I guess as more people enter the marketplace, it's a little bit more efficient for people to have a super fund, so a self-managed super fund. So the costs of running one are coming down. The question remains, why would you have one? Most of the reasons that people cite to us is I would like more control over my investments, or they have a more specific investment goal that they can't achieve through a public offer fund like an industry fund or one available through an investment house. So self-managed super funds have become popular because you can invest in direct property, which you can't do in a public fund. So a lot of people visit our office with the inquiry, can I set up a self-managed fund because I want to invest in property? That is either a really good idea or a really bad idea, and it comes down to what you're looking for and what you think you can and can't do with a self-managed fund. So control of your investments, though, that is not as much of an issue as it used to be. In days gone by, a lot of your public offer funds were very restricted in what investment options they have and what you could choose. So if you wanted something like a term deposit or direct equities or certainly property, there was no other option than to start a self-managed fund. And the costs involved in setting one up prohibited a lot of people from entering that marketplace. So a lot of the public offer funds and also industry funds, you can access the equities market, you can access direct shares, you can get ETFs without having to go to the trouble of setting up a self-managed fund. So for a lot of people that want a self-managed fund, they can actually achieve their goals without starting one. It's not to say you really shouldn't, but it just takes away, I guess, a lot of the motivation for people to do it. From a cost perspective, self-managed super funds work more on a flat dollar fee. So there's fees for your accounting, there's fees for your trust documents and fees for your audit, and they're on a dollar basis because they're usually done on an hourly or a job basis. Whereas a lot of your public offer funds, their fees seem to be on more of a percentage basis. So the larger your account balance, the larger your fee is in dollar terms. Whereas with a self-managed fund, because that fee is a dollar fee, the larger your fund, the smaller your fee is on a percentage basis. So it's usually, if you've got a large amount in superannuation, it can be a cost saving to start a self-managed fund. So, but look, if cost is your major driver, I don't know that a self-managed super fund is probably the best thing for you, but that's always worth investigating under advice. So when it comes to setting up a self-managed fund, there's a few things that they don't tell you in the advertisement, so to speak. So first and foremost, though, trustee obligations. Every superannuation fund, if you're a member of a self-managed super fund, with most working Australians are, you're the beneficiary of a superannuation trust. That's how the structure works. Every trust has a trustee, and usually it's a professional trustee, like an industry fund. They have a trustee company that operates as the trustee of their fund. In a self-managed fund, that trustee is you. So you need to know the legislation. The legislation is the Superannuation Industry Supervision Act. And as a trustee, you need to be across that legislation and aware of your obligations and the rules, what you can and can't do with your superannuation account. And there's a lot of things you can't do that surprise people. So it's fairly onerous to be a trustee of a super fund. So you've got to be aware of what you're getting yourself in for when you start one up. those obligations can be time consuming, and they add a level of expertise that you might need to get advice for, and that can also add to the cost. So when you're calculating how much this is going to cost you, you've got to factor in the cost of advice from either a financial planner, accountant or a solicitor on the various aspects of making sure you're compliant with the legislation. So that aside, your fees, you need to be aware that unless you've got a few $100,000 in super, then you're probably going to be paying more for your superannuation than you currently are. And it's okay if you're paying more for your superannuation as long as there's a distinct benefit for that extra expense. Most of the time, the best reason to have one is if you want to buy direct property. The issue which I guess a lot of the people that come into our office asking about self-managed funds sort of walk away with is they can't invest in property the way they can in their own names. So when you invest in property, you can't rent it out to your family and friends. That's a restriction under legislation. It's very difficult to borrow to buy a property, and once you've borrowed to buy a property, you can't extend that loan or you can't utilise the equity in that property. Under a self-managed super fund, if you borrow to buy a property, that's called a limited recourse borrowing arrangement, by the way. The idea is you buy the property with a loan and then you pay it off and that's it. When you want to buy another property, you need to save, your super fund needs to save another deposit and buy another property on its own. You can't leverage your existing asset. So typically people can't invest the way they want with a self-managed fund, so they walk away a little bit disappointed. So I guess the takeouts from that are, if you're considering a self-managed fund, you need to get advice. You need to speak to an accountant, you need to speak to a financial planner, and you may need to speak to a solicitor as well to understand what you're in for, what your costs are, and really have a clear idea of why it is you want one and whether or not you can achieve your objectives without one. If you can't, by all means, get in there and do one. So that's it for today, guys. I will put a link to our fact sheet on self-managed super funds in the comments below. I'll also put a link to the ATO's website. They've got a fact sheet on trustee obligations, which is very clear on what you can and can't do and what you need to know before you become a trustee of your super fund. So thanks for watching. As always, send us your questions, info@assetlab.com.au, and we will answer them either directly or in a video like this. Thanks.